Mensen, de meeste daarvan, hadden een Luciferiaans geloof. En dan kan iedereen zeggen, ja, geloof bestaat niet en God bestaat niet, alles bestaat niet. Nou, voor die mensen was het de waarheid en de werkelijkheid. Hun diende dus iets onstoffelijks. Hun diende wat zij noemden Lucifer. En ik kwam dus ook in die kringen. Alleen ik lachte erom, want het waren voor mij gewoon klanten. Dus ik kwam in wat ze noemden Satanskerken.
Ik wou zeggen, we hebben het nu over het satanisme.
Ja,
Oké.
Ik kwam dus in Satanskerken, maar ik kwam zeg maar op route even langs, even buurten. En daar was dan op dat moment een heilige mis, hun heilige soorten mis. En dat was met blote vrouwen en wat drank en dit en dat. En ik vond het alleen maar leuk. Ik hechtte weinig of geen geloof aan hun geloof. Of ik was er eigenlijk niet eens van overtuigd dat het überhaupt allemaal wel bestond.
Het was meer een schouwspel voor jou.
Ja, ik zag gewoon de donkerte en de slechtheid en de diepte daarvan zit in de mens zelf.
Ja.
Ik koppelde het nog niet zo. Maar ook die kringen verkeerde ik dus in, omdat ja, als gast zeg maar. Omdat ik vond het allemaal wel leuk. Al die blote vrouwen en al die dingetjes die daar speelden. Het was het vrije leven. Maar er kwam een moment, toen werd ik dus uitgenodigd, daarom vertel ik dit ook, om mee te gaan doen aan offers in het buitenland. Dat was het breekpunt. Kinderen.
Oké. Dat werd je gevraagd.
Ja, ik kon het niet.
The reason that these elite dark occult societies sacrifice and traffic children, first and foremost, is the energy associated with it. So when a human is in the state of fear and trauma, they release a energy. And this energy can be picked up by essentially negative extraterrestrial beings, negative archonic influences, and they feed off of it. They literally feed off the energetic release of fear and trauma. When these dark groups use children, because a child is not mentally programmed yet as an adult is, they are much more innocent, they're much more connected into their higher selves or into their divine, if you will. The trauma that they release is much more potent than using adults. During these ritualistic practices that the elite participate in, one of the compounds that is released in the children's body during torture, during trauma, is a compound called adrenochrome. It's released out of the adrenal gland during highly traumatized incidents. And this adrenochrome acts as essentially a drug. These secret societies that make up the deep state are nothing new. This actually spans back thousands and thousands of years, and they have always occulted this information for themselves. We need to understand what occulted actually means. Occulted just simply means hidden in Latin. It doesn't necessarily mean good or bad, it just means hidden. So these secret society groups have hidden or occulted this information for thousands and thousands of years. They've kept it to themselves, and they haven't shared it with anybody outside of their inner circles.
The secret societies are really more of a front organization that they use to recruit people, and they will gradually over time find out exactly how ruthless and bloodthirsty you are. It is only as you go farther and farther into this, you become embedded with your brothers in a brotherhood, you become more and more involved, you get deeper and deeper in, that then they start hitting you with the really heavy stuff. Until we face as a society that these things are actually happening and that there is a centralized control group that is responsible for this, we will be doomed for these people to continue to exert their control over us. If we don't learn how to respect each other, then we're never going to make any progress. We need to learn from the Me Too movement and understand that there is corruption, there is rape, there is pedophilia, there is child trafficking, there is human sacrifice, there is cannibalism, and all of these things are happening because there is a hidden elite that actually uses these behaviors as part of their religious sacrament. It actually doesn't matter whether you believe that these people exist or not. The bottom line is that they are actually advertising themselves constantly. They do it in movies. There's a whole set of symbols that you can look for in movies that show their influence. They do it in video games. They do it in television shows. They do it in music videos like crazy. They do it in awards ceremonies. And it's always in your face. Now is the time for us to get our heads out of the sand and understand that even if these things do seem unthinkable to us, there are people today who are actively practicing this. The evidence is voluminous, and really what it boils down to is that people don't want to look at the evidence because it is so upsetting.
In our obsession with antagonisms of the moment, we often forget how much unites all the members of humanity. Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bound. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us?
Solar Warden went active 1980, 1981. It was funded in large part by SDI through President Reagan, though that money was funneled off in many different programs. Solar Warden was developed to do exactly what its namesake says, to police our solar system. We were now able, we had the technology to prevent these interloper ET races from coming into our solar system, grabbing our people and leaving. We could now stop them. So Solar Warden was developed and began to do its job of policing the solar system. At the same time, we had in the interplanetary corporate conglomerate, which is made up of all of these military industrial complex corporations, we have all of these other programs that are developing technology at the same time and are developing much, much more advanced technologies. So advanced, in fact, that there are ET races that come here to trade for our technology.
Corey Goode is the one insider I found whose testimony ties all of these different threads together. I've heard Corey have knowledge of something that each of the different other insiders I've spoken to had said to me in the past. Nobody else had ever done that before, and that was fascinating because I had not put this information online. The information was proprietary. It was things that I'd heard over the course of conversations that could have gone on for many, many dozens of hours over time, spreading across about 20 years worth of my own past history.
I think they chose children for these MyLab programs in several different ways. They had to profile them. They definitely used standardized testing and a few other ways to identify whether they had a skill or a talent that they needed. Then they would check out their family life. They preferred children from broken homes or from homes that were not harmonious because the children are used to getting smacked around, they were used to stressful environments, and the parents were not always as attentive as other parents. Therefore, the children were able to handle a lot more stress, and the parents may not notice, certain behavior in the kids. Well, I guess you would say a typical day, if there is a typical day in the life of a MyLab, would be your parents dropping you off at school, just like any other day. And except that day, you're pulled aside and told you're going to go on a field trip. You're in a special education class or an accelerated learning class, or you're special. You're being taken off campus to go, look at dinosaurs. Well, you are taken, put in a van. Usually a person is driving that is military looking, sometimes in uniform. They would then drive us for a little over an hour to Carswell Air Force Base. We parked inside this hangar that was a motor pool, and we walked to the back, and there was an elevator. And the elevator went down quite a ways. And when we came out, we were underground in a Cold War era type bunker. That would then lead us to another set of elevators that would take us down where we would get on underground trams that would, there were trains that would take us over 500 miles per hour anywhere in the world. When we were sent to one of these locations through one of these shuttles, we would then go through, sometimes because of travel time, we would only get 45 minutes of training in, sometimes 2-3 hours of training in. Then we would go back, be debriefed, and they would give us a chemical through a shot, and they would sit us in a chair in front of a movie screen and basically hypnotize us and give us a screen memory of going to a museum and looking at dinosaurs. They would then put us in the same van, drive us back to school, let us out, and as our parents picked us up, we would tell them all about looking at dinosaurs.
MK Ultra was a program done by the CIA in the 1950s and 60s, and within MK Ultra, they experimented with trauma-based mind control through the use of electroshock therapy, through the use of mind-altering drugs, through the use of even hypnotic regression and many other techniques to figure out how to control and program human beings.
There was programming at bases. They used military bases because they won't have any interference when they have someone on a military base. And a lot of my programming took place on military bases. I would like to talk about the fact that there are rituals done at the military bases also, and that rituals are not a cover. The people that do the mind control are involved, and rituals are very much a part of how they do things. For example, naval intelligence members or people that are in naval intelligence are usually very involved with Ordo Templi Orientis. And that doesn't mean that everyone in naval intelligence is involved in that. But naval intelligence is responsible for a lot of overseeing of ritual activity in this country. And they are responsible for a lot of this going on. There are other organizations, other agencies involved, but naval intelligence is very involved.
We were taken to some kind of facility out on the Nevada desert. And for a long time, I thought it was Area 51. But there was also another underground facility at Tonopah. So either Area 51 or the Tonopah facility was taken to a medical dispensary type of place. And I was sat down in a waiting room with the lights off. Everything they did seemed to be to cover memory, to make sure that if anybody did remember anything, being in a room with the lights off, you wouldn't be able to see the people clearly, things like that. I was given fatigues to wear that night, with no rank insignia, no name tags, no identifying marks of any kind. Was forbidden to speak to the other people that I was out there with, beyond what was necessary to run the test. So the situation they put us in was very isolating and very frightening, terrifying actually. And so we got to this facility, we sat down in this waiting room with the lights off, and I still see it really clearly. I could draw a picture. And one by one, we had to go off to the side in this little room. Finally, they called my name, and I went into the little room, and it was a small room. There was a security guard in there in desert camo fatigues, wearing a sidearm. He was standing at parade rest. And I was told to lay down on this stainless steel examining table that looked old, like it was maybe from the 40s or 50s. And I laid down on there fully clothed. I didn't have to take anything off. And I waited for a long time with that security guard watching me. And finally, some guy in a white lab coat came in, the same door I had gone in to the room in. And he said, "Stay calm," 3 times in this really deadpan, monotone voice. And he walked past the security guard, up the right side of the table, got up to the right side of my head, and then he had a hypodermic needle hidden in the sleeve of his lab coat, and he injected me in the side of the neck right here. And whatever the chemical was went straight to my brain. And so I'm kind of in shock from whatever this injection's doing to me, because it went straight to the brain, and I was like, in shock. Suddenly there's 2 guys on either side of that table pulling me up by the arms and dragging me off the table and down through this doorway where there was a long flight of stairs going down. And for some reason, I remember it as one long flight going down, not switchbacks like a lot of store cases are. It was just straight down. They half carried me, half dragged me down those stairs. And at the bottom of the stairs, there was like this little room that had a one-way mirror in it. And I went through the effects of that injection in that room. And I felt like, I've described it so many ways down through the years. It was kind of like feeling like your body's turning to soda pop fizz or beer foam. It's just like, when your leg goes to sleep and it comes back and there's all the pins and needles and tingling and everything else like that. It was like that was happening to my whole body. But super duper intense pins and needles. And I just curled up on the floor and just screamed because it was just doing this number on me, and I felt like I was coming apart somehow. I don't know why or how I thought that, but that's how my body felt. It felt like it was just gonna come apart and run down a drain in the floor. And I had a feeling that because that mirrored thing on the wall, I think it was a one-way mirror, and they were looking at me through the mirror to watch me go through the effects of this. And I've racked my brain to try to come up with some idea of what this injection was and what it was for. And the only thing I've been able to come up with is maybe they were trying to create a chemical version of ascension.
One of the technologies that I was exposed to while in the MyLab programs were the chemical cocktails they would use on us. They would use them to enhance us in many different ways. Some of the ways that we would be enhanced would be if they discovered we had an intuitive empath ability. There was a cocktail that they would give us that would enhance it, make it many-fold stronger. They would also give cocktails to people that would have hormones in them that would make them stronger, faster, and think quicker. Major part of the program was that when you started, they were not quite sure where they would send you. A lot of the kids that were in these programs, they would end up in different syndicates here on the Earth working for the cabal, and a small percentage, very small, would end up going into the secret space program.
Certain children were picked who had certain DNA, and I was connected with that. And what they did was, when we were like 5 and 6 years old, they took us there. And they trained us, and we learned and we trained and we did all sorts of operations when we were there. Now, when I was 5 years old, my parents moved to Los Angeles at the time, out of the blue, and I was living on Sepulveda Boulevard. And the Mars jump rooms for children were on at 999 Sepulveda Boulevard. I now know. So, and I didn't know, so I had these memories before I knew that this particular information about these Mars jump rooms on Sepulveda Boulevard. It was a lot of training. So say from 5 years old to 25 years old was spent there. And I know some of the some of the people now who are back here. But what they did then at the end of the Mars, at the end of that thing, is they used age regression technology, brought us back to 5 years old, and then placed us exactly back to where we were.
The reason so few went into the secret space program was that most of the participants, almost all of the participants, are pulled from various military branches. They bring people in to the military, send them through training, testing, find out where their skills lean, and if they have the fortitude for this type of mission. And then they're invited in or drafted in, and they'll serve a 20-year term. And this is referred to as a 20 and back. And after that 20 years, they're actually age regressed and regressed back in time using a technology that was handed to us by non-terrestrials. And then they were buttoned up in time and placed back in their life. And then they finish out the rest of their military term and then return to civilian life, having no memory of serving in the secret space program. The whole point of regressing people back in time after serving in the 20 and back and wiping their memory has to do with a deal that was made with an extraterrestrial group that gave us that technology. There's a Nordic group that are engaged in a time and space battle with a reptilian group. This battle's gone on for many thousands of years.
When delving into this research, some people formulate ideas that there's only good extraterrestrials here or there's only bad extraterrestrials here. But we need to understand that the law of polarity is universal. There's both good or benevolent extraterrestrials here to help us, and there's negative extraterrestrials here to essentially feed off of us and traumatize us into a state of fear. These negative extraterrestrial species involve some gray species. They also involve many reptilian species and many non-physical archonic entities that can also remotely influence and utilize much of that fear energy and traumatized energy that we release.
Towards the end of my training, it started to become pretty clear that I had done very well in the intuitive empath training. I'd done very well in the rest of the general training that I was given. And I was starting to be introduced to non-terrestrial beings. So it became very obvious that I was going to be interacting with non-terrestrials, and I assumed it was going to be in an off-world environment. Little did I know that I was going to be drafted in this program when I was 16 years old. And it was during my Christmas break between the age of 16 and 17 years old. I turned 17 in February. I was taken from my room. I was then taken to Carswell Air Force Base. I was then transported to the moon, where I sat and signed a bunch of papers that were non-disclosures, were just a big stack of papers signing my life away when I wasn't even 17 years old yet. The Lunar Operations Command is a moon base, and it was built out originally by the Germans in the late 1930s, early 1940s. While they were building this complex, they had utilized an ancient alien building that was not too terribly far away. They had found a bunch of these buildings on the moon, and they had found one of the buildings that they were able to patch up with some of the concrete they made from the local regolith. They then were able to pressurize it and use it as a base of operations while they built out the Lunar Operation Command.